Good evening, everyone. I'm Clay, joined by the gracious Miss Ellen. Good to see everyone tonight, or everyone on the replay crew. Hope you're having a good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever. Just hope it's been a good day for you. It's been a good day for us. Miss Ellen, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm well.
Just want to
Doing
make
very
sure
well.
the mic was working.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Okay. Just been doing some reading today, or listening and reading because ADHD doesn't do all that well with just reading. So I have to do both at the same time. So anyway, that's been good. It's
So
been
yeah,
hot
it's been
as
a nice quiet day around here. Usually we've
Mhm.
got kids running around. The neighborhood pool is right kind of across the street. So there's usually like a party going on all day Saturday, but today was relatively quiet, peaceful. So
Mhm.
kind of nice for a change. Had some good rain this weekend. Hope y'all, heat is obviously here, but hope y'all all have had a good and blessed week. Got an interesting lineup tonight. Just called it Hodgepodge because that's really what it's going to be. It's just a hodgepodge of discussion. Received some questions, and then a lot of things in the news over the past week or 2 weeks. And so we just thought we'd take a night and just kind of throw them out and talk about them. We've been talking, for example, about financial failures. And, there were some things in the news with BLM and a lawsuit against them. And then obviously they've been big in the news for some of the activities or purchases, we'll say, of their leadership. And so we'll get into some of that here shortly. We'll also talk about, recession. Will there be a recession? Yes or no?
Are we already in a recession?
Are we already in a recession? Yes or no, or maybe. And then there is also the discussion of gold and silver. Had trouble remembering that. We get a few
It's
questions
right
on
there.
gold and silver.
Yes.
And been a few things happening. Don't know if you saw it, but BlackRock announced a ETF for Bitcoin, which the CEO of BlackRock, the well-known Larry Fink, described it as a digital gold. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit here shortly. And then
Okay.
we may finish up with a few comments on our beloved World Economic Forum.
Oh, okay. NTF is a non help me out. You said ETF
ETF,
is a
electronically traded
electronic.
exchange traded fund.
And then what is the little
It,
meme? NFT.
um,
NFT,
and,
right?
and an ETF, you can think of it just like a mutual fund, except it trades like a stock.
Okay. There's so many acronyms these days. I'm just like, okay, what's what? There's an NFT, an ETF, all the things.
Yeah, a mutual fund generally is a portfolio of stocks with a manager who actively trades that portfolio or manages that portfolio. An ETF is generally a fixed portfolio of assets that doesn't change,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sold like a stock. So for you to buy it, you don't buy it directly from the fund like you do a mutual fund. You buy a share of the ETF, a pro rata share of that pool of assets. So it's kind of like a mutual fund for all intents and purposes. We'll, use it in the same context. Technically, it is a little different. KP, stepped away for a second, catching up on super speed. What are you reading and listening to, Ellen?
Actually, I'm reading and listening to a book that Clay recommended to me by C.S. Lewis. It's called Mere Christianity.
My favorite
And
author.
and it is I have been doing some spiritual deep diving here recently, and Clay thought that might be very helpful to my experience or my journey. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, on any new experience or revelation or whatever, you've got a lot of questions. And that book, from a spiritual standpoint, just kind of touches on a number of different areas, and it does so thoughtfully and relatively clearly. It's not a heavy theological book, but C.S. Lewis had a great way of expressing deep thoughts clearly and concisely. Carrie Berry's mom, Crazy Cat Queen, how y'all doing tonight? Good to see y'all.
Yeah, and also it was excuse me. I was very much, I mean, I've always been a Christian. I've not always been connected to Christianity as I once was, and I was recently rebaptized, and I just wanted to really kind of deep dive into it. And this book is great, from C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, it is. How do I say this? It is a book that will outlive all of us. People who get in the same situation will still be reading it years, decades, millennia from now. I don't know how long things are going to hold up or last before that meteor hits. But sometimes the way things are going in DC, I'm like, okay, it's time. Go ahead and shoot the meteor this way. But it's a classic work. It's a great work. It's great thoughts, and it's a fairly clean read. So I have suggested it to several different people, and in the past, each one has enjoyed it. So I recommend it. Now, excuse me.
Check your private chat real quick.
That's a subtle hint.
Yeah, slightly.
Okay. She's just letting me know that she's figuring out the technology with this chat and uploading thing. So
He asked me if I had uploaded the the previous videos on YouTube to Rumble. And I was like, I have that. It does it automatically. I have that set up.
Crazy Cat Queen. Good on you, Ellen. Always keep learning about yourself, about the world. Absolutely. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And so I enjoy learning. It's part of the reason we do this channel. Everybody has their gifts, their abilities, their strengths, and their weaknesses. There's nothing at all wrong with that, and hope to enjoy that experience as fully as we can.
Okay, KP, I don't know if you are like me and you ADHD as you can get and have trouble. So I have to, there's actually, YouTube Grandpa reads this and then shows you, so you can read it with him as he's reading. The Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. It's really cool because it allows me to listen and read. So I have many senses going on at one time, and it's much easier for me to comprehend what's going on. I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, there's a lot of books on audio or pods, but I find myself when I'm driving paying more attention to the book than I am the road. So I don't usually do that a whole lot, but I know a lot of people that do. And can do it well. I get to thinking about the particular topic or the comments, or I'll be debating it in my mind. I'll be kind of a central focus, which is not a good thing to do while you're driving. So I kind of ease off of it and just put on some music I can just strum along to while I'm driving. And when I'm driving, I will sing. I will sing at the top of my lungs sometimes, generally only when I'm alone, because I try not to offend my riders. But if you pass by my truck going down the road, windows down kind of day, you'll probably hear something blurting out.
All right. I'm going to try to get this. I'm going to share this. Apparently it's Internet Grandpa, but let me get back to your video and let me see if I can post it.
KP, I often read in my Kindle, but listen to books in my art studio. Did not know you were an artist. You're going to have to share some of that with us. And Ellen with the hot link to, is that YouTube Grandpa?
The Internet Grandpa, yes. And he reads the
Internet
book.
Grandpa,
and then,
okay.
And not just reads it, but like he scrolls the pages as he's reading the book, which for me is very helpful.
Yeah, that to me would be a lot better than just listening to somebody read it. That's a good combination. That's a little bit of a tedious job to do, but more power to him. Crazy Cat Queen. I once drove an extra hour, 4 hours from Denver to Philly to finish a book on audio. I ended up getting to a hotel until 3 a.m. I knew there was something about you that I loved, because I would probably do the same thing. I actually kind of enjoy driving, particularly at night when nobody else is on the road. It's peaceful. Traffic usually is not a big deal. It's cool, windows down, music blaring.
Yeah, but even when my kids were little, if we had to go on a long trip, we left at like 10 p.m. because they were asleep. I mean, because that was clearly past their bedtime and there was very little traffic and it was just easier, to drive.
Whole lot easier to drive.
Carrie Berry's mom. I need to have books on tape or podcasts. Let's see. That is helpful. Just to keep my mind in a good place. Clay, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. I just had my screen blow up, so I'm trying to get it back.
It looks like you were either cut off or something was seriously wrong.
Yeah, no. Getting there.
Okay, and the Moffat on Money posts are from Toots. Like we told you guys before, we ask her to be on StreamYard so that she can show and start comments. But even I cannot comment as myself on StreamYard. It's all under Moffat on Money. So that is Toots. Or Zan's tired. Etc. 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 I love you.
She posts the little pink flower.
Mm-hmm.
That's Toot's signature. Carrie Berry's mom. Need to have books on tape or podcasts in my ears at all times just to keep my mind in a good place. Whatever it takes, keep it in a good place. Not enough people focus on that. And it is sometimes a labor of love. It's easy to get caught up in the pains and the hurts and the ugliness of the world, but you gotta just focus your mind and concentrate on the good things in life. Give, if I start getting irritated or whatever, I'll just start giving thanks. Can't say I'm necessarily in a terribly thankful mood, but as I start listing off the good things in my life, I feel my mood change. So whatever works for y'all. Julia, stopping by to say a quick hello. Well, hello. Good to see you. Appreciate you stopping by. I really do enjoy, people dropping in and giving us a quick hey, because we know and we understand not every night is a great and open night for everybody. It's kind of impossible to find one night that's good for everybody or good for everybody all the time. So,
and Saturday is in the summer is typically not a good night. And we added Tuesdays, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, we'd love to see you guys there too, if you can make it. That would be great because we're just doing Q&A. We'll answer any questions that you have on finance or the economy. And even if you can't be there, we usually try to post it a couple days before to get, we'll answer the questions that are on the comments of the community page first. And then we'll get to any questions that you guys have, or there's always a good million questions on Reddit.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and pull, 5 or 10 questions from Reddit, and then take the ones from y'all first, and then throw out some of the goofy ones from Reddit to fill out the time.
Nope. I think some of us are fighting over this.
I'm being annoyed about it on all the channels because this matters.
Thanks, Julia.
Very much.
Appreciate that.
We do really appreciate your support.
Mm-hmm.
And, we love our little family. We've actually, we just feel like we have a little family, good people on here, people that, are encouraging to us, encouraging to each other, that are warm and gracious. And that's really a great part of the fun and joy of this channel. And we very much appreciate y'all and the spirit you bring to it. Crazy Cat Queen. I'm supposed to be studying for 1 quiz and 2 exams for Monday. Face, orange raised eyebrow. Also, don't freak out. Haven't done my taxes yet. Don't worry, Cat Queen. I have, operated a jail ministry before, and I'm willing to do it again.
He's lying. Listen, I didn't do my 2019 taxes until last year?
Yes.
Yep. So
a little slow getting them out.
Mm-hmm.
I once had a client, a dentist, that didn't file taxes for 9 years.
Really?
Yep. Had to go back and redo, which was not what I usually did, but went back and rebuilt his taxes for 9 years and pled the case with the IRS. I was registered in front of the IRS, with the IRS. And so that was an interesting time. Just have no interest in doing tax law or anything along those lines. Being a representative for tax issues, no.
Oh, hey, Linda Rapp.
Thank you, Clay. KP. It's a good group here, and I look forward to seeing you and Ellen each week.
Oh, we look forward to seeing you too, KP.
Very much so. Very much. Julia, just pay what you think you owe. That's what they get extra spicy over. Yeah, now I will, Ellen and I were just talking about this the other day in terms of, deductions and all. I don't mind being a little aggressive. And if I'm audited, I'll be glad to argue it in front of the IRS. But some people kind of go beyond that, where they're taking things which there's no basis for and which they know aren't correct. The IRS looks on that kind of dimly. So IRS is an 800-pound gorilla. I just don't want to piss off. My own personal preference.
Okay, so our friend Linda Rapp is here, but her comments are not showing up on StreamYard. Hello, my love. I hope you're having a lovely evening and enjoying this. I see you on YouTube, but not up here. Huh. Wonder why.
Sometimes I think YouTube is a little slow.
No, the comments below hers were already shown. She must be like a ninja.
Huh. I would say something, but I think I've already over the past year demonstrated my technical competence in enough areas. So
let's not.
It's the stupid little things that get me. And I admit, trying to run this broadcast.
Oh, there she is finally.
See,
I'm sorry. We know you're not on StreamYard, but all of your comments should show up on StreamYard. But your first one didn't. So, hey, girl. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just a little slow connecting from YouTube to StreamYard. So there's sometimes a little delay. But good to see. Appreciate you joining us.
Always.
Yeah, StreamYard is what we use to handle the broadcast, and it connects to YouTube, and you've got data going back and forth. And so the comments actually are run on YouTube, whereas the video is run on StreamYard. And they kind of like pass in the night. You know, that's my great technical explanation right there, kind of passing in the night, souls passing in the night.
Some things don't make it. Some things do.
Some things get a little lost and wander before they, find the home. We are definitely a ninja chat.
Oh, yes, we are. Sorry. I'm going to leave the mouse alone. We're all competing.
Dude, Crazy Cat Queen. Dude, my husband hadn't done taxes for 10 years before I met him, and we ended up paying over 60 grand in back taxes. And so I do the taxes at least for that year. And we get refunds. So that's a good thing.
Job.
Good job. Well done.
Like I said, I'm not touching it anymore. Okay.
Linda, I'm watching on my TV, but doing comments on my phone, so that may be slowing things down. We complain about things being a few seconds delayed, but to me, it's really almost all like a miracle that it even works, that we can even do this kind of stuff.
Hey, Linda, that means we're getting double the hours. You just keep doing your thing. We just need like a few hundred more. That's it.
Ellen getting her plugs in.
Sorry. Like, subscribe, share to your friends, share to anyone who has any interest in finance, which should be everyone you know, because they all have money.
Yeah, mention us in your will, whatever.
Whatever you got to do. Wait, what?
Julia, wait, what?
Which part?
Which part? Yeah, I'm a little lost on that one.
You're talking about the being able to have members? We need more watch hours? Yes, we need like 390 more.
Yeah, that elevates our status on YouTube, gets us better publicity. We're monetized. We get better activity on YouTube. And that's kind of like the first goal that we had. Actually, when we started this, we hoped to reach that goal in 2 years. That's kind of what the goal we set for ourselves. Looks like we'll make it in about a year. So that's a little bit exciting in and of itself. And now that we're close, we're like, let's just, get there, get over that hump.
That
And
is
then we'll set the
after.
next goal.
Hang on. Oh, I can't get it. The next one.
Crazy Cat Queen. I try to be a good citizen. My hubs tried to tell me to work on a deal with IRS to pay less, and I told him, nope, that's his civic responsibility. So I just paid it. Yeah, it is our civic responsibility to pay taxes. I think it is my familial responsibility to pay as little as possible, to pay no more than what I owe. Now, me and the IRS, we may not agree exactly on what that amount is, but hadn't had any real serious problems with them to date.
That is after, because we were already monetized on Rumble. Sorry, for some reason Alexa just started firing up over there, and I was just like, why is she talking to me? And yes, Toots has done an excellent job. She put us on 24/7 on one of her devices and just keeps it rolling. And I think she's added about 30 hours so far.
Which, we really, really appreciate the effort. We do. That's just extremely kind and thoughtful. So thank you. And certainly not asking everybody else to do it. We're going to do it in, over the next 5 or 6 weeks. So obviously the sooner the better. It is a goal for us. But we're going to get in there. We're going to get there. And we appreciate y'all's contributions to it very much.
Absolutely. Hang on, Toots. Yeah, only 30. It doesn't update as much as we would like it to. I think the hours towards the monetization update I'm going to say once a week. But it's hard to say what hours, but you have done a lot. I mean, 30 is a lot from one person.
Julia, Alexa decided if you want to be monetized, you need to be like EDB and get used to Alexa and Siri chiming in.
I mean, and there she goes again. She's like, what do you want? I didn't say anything to you. Nothing.
Who was it? I think somebody mentioned to EDB that I'd actually bounced for Dave Matthews.
Dave Matthews, yeah.
Yeah. That was funny. So she owes me a joint show.
I think she just wants to hear about Dave Matthews. She's obsessed.
Crazy Cat Queen. Oh, trust me, making that big IRS payment was more of a take responsibility for my husband than anything else for our marriage. I now do as much as possible to pay the least I can. Yeah, it's, we don't have the tax burden that other countries do. But the average American, the average working American makes about 55 a year. Spends the month of January, February, March, April, and most of April, just to pay his taxes. That's before buying food, before buying any insurance, before clothes for the kids, school for the kids, any of that. Somewhere around 42% of your income. The founding fathers went to war over a 2% tax on tea. Just on tea. Not income. Just a 2% tax on tea, which they thought was outrageous.
Hey, that's enough to make legal bites go nuts.
Yeah, if they were here today, they would be stacking bodies left and right. It's just a whole different world. Yeah, we need to see if EDB recognizes you. If I was a betting man,
Probably not.
probably not. Carrie Berry's mom, I'm not giving the government a penny more than absolutely necessary until they start being more responsible with the money they have. I agree, but there's also in the back of my mind the realization that government can never be responsible with the money they have. It is just not in a politician's interest to be responsible and disciplined with the money. They get votes by doing, let's say, favors.
Mhm.
Some people call it pork or graft, corruption, whatever. But Paul, I've been around for a few years, and from what I've seen and known, politics is generally about the assumption of power and more power. And that's what I have a problem with.
And we've talked about this, I think, last week, where, if we were able to at least take the Social Security money that I know you hate this idea that we're putting in and invest it for ourselves, we would do way better than what Social Security is going to do.
Yeah. If, I ran my numbers, and if I had been able to invest my Social Security money, including the employer contributions, I would have about $32 million when I was 65. 5% of that would be 1.7 million a year. And instead I'll get 3,000, 3,500 a month, whatever it is. So 35,000 a year. If I had my druthers.
So why was
But-
that not possible back in the day? Why did they? I mean, I know the Great Depression. I get that. And Social Security taking care of them, but why wasn't it quickly gotten rid of? Why wasn't it? Because they just needed the money to keep making the money to support the people that they agreed to?
No, in the 20s and 30s, communism and socialism was seen as a good thing. A lot of people were increasingly looking to government to solve their problems. And you had the Great Depression, which was hammering a lot of people. The Federal Reserve did some things that made the Great Depression worse. There were some government policies, Hoot-Smalley, tariff, some other things that made the Great Depression worse. And people were in a horrible way, a lot of them. And there was also the Dust Bowl in the Midwest that killed crop production. And so food was, tough to come by. And you had these people growing older that had nothing to live off of, couldn't afford to live, et cetera, et cetera. So back then it was an environment of, the government should solve problems and take more responsibility. And so it did. That, FDR's New Deal and Social Security and several major things were passed. The interesting thing is, for example, the New Deal, studies show that the New Deal really did not help get rid of the Great Depression or end the Great Depression. The biggest cure for the Great Depression was actually World War II. And then the aftermath there. We had basically bombed our manufacturing, no production anywhere else. And so we basically sold the world everything. And that's why we had the roaring, booming economy in the late 40s, 50s, 60s.
Okay. So let me ask you this then. If that's the case, and the government clearly was investing the money they got from the original Social Security. Yes?
No, they weren't. They would put
They were
it
just-
maybe in Treasury or agency securities.
Okay, so
But the
once
return on those was very low.
Yeah, once the depression era was sort of lifted, and they could have invested and made money, correct? The government and everyone else.
Yes. But for example, Crazy Cat Queen, most of the population won't invest, so they'd end up destitute in their elder years. And that was the
True, but wait, hang on. Okay, let's say the government made you take that money and put it into a mutual fund instead of Social Security.
well, that's my argument. Give the people either the choice of participating in Social Security or leaving Social Security and letting them expand their IRA and put the money in an IRA. And so it has to go somewhere for their quote unquote retirement.
Right. That would be a condition, but I would so much rather have it in a mutual fund than just Social Security.
Yeah,
That
I
makes more
can't find
sense to
any
me.
20-year period where you wouldn't be far better off in a index mutual fund like the S&P 500 than you would be with the payout in Social Security. Now you take that 30 or 40 years, it just literally blows it out of the water. No contest.
Hang on. Let's answer this real quick.
Wait. Let's go first with how did it all work from the start? The idea of Social Security was to kind of a pay-as-you-go plan. And when Social Security started, there were like 223 people paying in for each recipient in the system. Now, by the 40s, that had dropped to, I want to say, my numbers are approximate, 150 to 1. And we've been dropping ever since, but more rapidly since the 80s and 90s when the replacement rate dropped below 2. For example, used to be you would have a family might have 3, 4, 5 kids. That would not be uncommon. Few families had just one. Almost no families had 0. And then the 80s, 90s come along. You've got all sorts of different factors at play. You've got the feminist movement. You've got prosperity, like in a growing economy like we'd never seen before. You had opportunities opening up everywhere. And so people, when they got married, decided not to have kids or to wait and have kids later. And so they had fewer kids. So instead of having 3, 4, 5 kids, they would have 2, they would have 1.8, they'll have 1.3. And so that replacement rate drops to where we don't have enough kids, we don't have enough workers growing into the system to replace those who leave it and retire. Yes, ma'am.
I think we have a request to go back, but I want to say something about that before you get to this question. Right now, we're at we aren't replacing ourselves, and 1/5 of the Zennials or Generation Z is identifying as 20% is identifying as LGBTQI alphabet soup. And that is not helping either. If 20% of the population, when it was typically in the past 3% of the population that chose not to have children, now we have issues with fertility, and then 20% of the new generation is LGBTQI plus. This is not good for society and civilization. It's just not.
Yeah, it's just an economic fact that it depends on a growing economy, depends on a growing number of people, because the growing number of people creates the demand for more goods and services. And we talked about this couple weeks ago, it's like your grandparents. What do you buy them for Christmas? You know, they don't want anything. They just want to see you and get a hug. Now, what do you buy a young couple that's about to have a baby? Well, what don't they need? They need everything.
Diapers,
Diapers,
lots of
crib,
diapers.
toaster, a bigger refrigerator, a bigger house, whatever. They need everything. So it's young families that really drive the consumer demand for goods and services, new goods and services. That's what grows the economy, expands the economy, creates jobs for the rest of us. Well, if they're not having babies, if they're not creating all this additional demand, it's not going to come from anywhere else. Old people aren't going to decide that, hey, all of a sudden, I want a newer, bigger house. I want more cars. I want to replace all my furniture. I want whole new clothes. I want fashion. Yeah, it's just not happening. So practical reality, not trying to be ugly to anybody that has delayed their family, either by choice or circumstances that didn't allow. But I'm just speaking as an economist here. Young people provide the demand for goods and services.
Well, let me ask you this question then. Was there a point after the Great Depression when they started all this Social Security that they could have become whole? I don't know what the correct word is cheaper than what we're going to deal with now?
Well, anytime in the past, it would have been easier.
Okay.
The longer we wait, the harder it gets, the more in the hole we get. So it's just now practical reality is Congress will probably do some patches, which will, extend its health for a while longer.
Won't that cause more inflation?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Probably actually will hurt the economy. Because one thing they would do is increase taxes. And higher taxes generally are a negative to economic growth.
So we're paying a higher rate. And then, an interest rate because of the inflation, and everything is more expensive. And then the taxes go up. And then you really can't even afford to have children, can you?
It's a catch-22. You look at, what's happening with the national debt. Just the change in interest rates so far has cost us an additional $700 or $800 billion. If the Fed hikes again, if some of the spending goes up, we'll be running $2 trillion a year in deficit.
Okay. Clay,
so eventually all this is going to collapse.
And we're not trying to be morbid at all. Sorry. We're just trying to be real.
It's just like a personal bankruptcy. You keep adding debt. There comes a point where your income, even if you took 100% of your income, you couldn't pay off your debt. You declare bankruptcy. Well, the government is no different with one exception. They have tax revenues. But as the interest increases, and remember, the interest compounds every year on the debt. We collect $2 trillion in $2.1 trillion in taxes every year. We borrow everything else. So if interest rates continue to increase or stay high for the next 2 or 3 years, we've got all of this outstanding treasury debt, $32 trillion, which 80% of it is going to reprice in the next 4 or 5 years. Well, it was all issued when interest rates were 0.2%, 0.5%. Well, now when it comes due and matures and it has to be refinanced, instead of 0.5%, it's going to be 4% or 5%. So it's going to be, 2,000% higher. And as that happens over the next few years, we'll actually have higher interest costs than what we collect in tax revenues. That's third world nation stuff. The only way to cover that is to increase taxes more or print money. And print money is when you get that hyperinflation, when you get that high inflation. And Laura asked a question. She had to jump in and say, hey, she left a question and I was going to get to it. I'll get to it now. She asked, the UK government is saying that rising wages are now creating inflation. Is that true?
Mm-mm.
And the answer is
Yes and
no
no.
and no. No and yes.
No, yeah.
Increases in wages are always behind inflation. Employers don't look at stuff going on in the economy and say, oh, inflation is about to go up. Let me go ahead and give everybody a raise. No, inflation goes up, people get pinched, and then employers start hiking wages, and generally below what the actual inflation has been. Most wage hikes don't keep up with inflation.
Mm-mm.
But that's part of the problem in killing inflation quickly. Like a lot of people think, oh, the inflation rate now is down, has dropped. Well, it wouldn't surprise me to see it start going up again, because historically it has. Historically, inflation takes 5 to 7 years to get down back below 2%. Once it goes above 5%, it takes 5 to 7 years to get it back down below 2%. Never before in history have they been able to get inflation down in 1 year and keep it down. It's just too complex. There's too many different interrelated aspects between prices, between supply and demand, between a recessionary economy, no goods produced. You've still got people who want goods. So government's trying to pay for more people on welfare and food stamps, so it prints more money, so inflation starts back up. Wage hikes contribute to increasing cost of goods. It's just a very complex inner working. And it's really impossible for the Fed or anybody to just do one thing and fix it all quickly, if that makes sense. So it's likely we're not done struggling with inflation.
Well, let me ask you another question. I heard this week that the last time the federal government raised rates during a quote unquote recession or pre-recession, when was that? Because I heard it was 1929.
What was the question now? I'm sorry. The last time the government raised rates
before a recession was 1929. What happened? Maybe it was 27. I'm not good with dates and numbers.
Usually raising rates causes recession. So they have raised rates prior to recessions before.
But we're kind of in one, aren't we?
Huh?
We are in a recession, are we not?
That's a debate right now. We'll get to that a little later.
Okay, let me do this real quick.
This question's been up there.
Oh.
Do we need a continually rising population? For economic growth, yes. At least for the past. Markets have been around for, I don't know, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. So if you create a product and you want to exchange it for money or other goods or services, the more you can sell, the more goods and services or money you receive. Well, how do you sell more if the number of people reduces or the number of people who need your product reduces? Like if I make baby cribs, old people don't need baby cribs. So historically, yes, for a growing economy, you need a growing population.
And there's never been a civilization with a declining population, especially the numbers. I mean, Japan had twice the number, of deaths last year than they had births.
Yeah, historically, a declining population is a declining country. And a lot of people think, we're worried about excess population. That's a Malthusian argument. Malthus was an economist who came up with the theory that the earth can only support so many people. And there was a bet in the 1980s, and I forget the two economists, but basically they picked a basket of 10 goods, 10 commodities, 10 metals, wheat, other products, and bet on the majority of those would be cost more in 10 years. One economist bet that they would cost more in 10 years. The other economist took the other side and said they would cost less. Well, 10 years later, 8 of them cost less. Production had increased, technology had improved, whatever. In 2012, for the first time in history, even with a booming population in the world, for the first time in history, we produced enough food to feed everybody in the world. Now, we didn't have the logistics to get it there, but we produced enough food to feed everybody in the world. So the concern that, if we took everybody and gave them 100 meters of space, 10 by 10, they would all fit in the state of Texas. So there's still a lot of land, still a lot of the world available, still a lot of resources that we could develop, a lot of things we could do better, a lot of things we could do more efficiently or wisely. But look at Taiwan versus mainland China. Taiwan's just a rock, has no mineral wealth. When the Republic, Chiang Kai-shek and the Republican Chinese fled there in the late 40s after being chased out by the communists, there was no infrastructure, there was no universities, there was no mineral wealth, there was no agriculture there. But they moved there, and they're more densely populated than Chinese are. And by every metric now, they have a better standard of living than the communist Chinese. Free trade, free markets are a miracle to providing goods and services when needed. Innovation. Who can measure or anticipate innovation? So I don't know what, I don't know what the future holds, but personally, I'm not terribly scared of population increasing. It's increasing in different parts of the world, like in Africa, population's increasing, but prosperity,
but they can't feed
average
themselves.
Income in Africa is increasing at the same time.
Entire Africa, South Africa, which parts?
The whole of Africa.
Okay.
India, even with their case system, their wealth is increasing. Their schools are getting much better. India has more honor students than we have students. India is really going to be our future competition, not China.
No.
And the thing that's hurt China and their economy is really struggling was their one baby policy that they had in place for 30 years. They got rid of it, I don't know, 10 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, but it's too late. And their economy is hurting.
And these birth rates, from what I've heard, are 1.34 like per female. That is not.
Yeah, Japan's birth rate, males. Crazy cat queen. Japan's birth rate was 1.34. China was 1.28. US at 1.64. 2020 data. Yeah, that's fatal for all three.
It's much worse now than it was then. And I'm going to put this up there because I think it's important.
Question, dumb one. When you say government raises rates, what does rate mean? Sorry, I really know nothing about finance. That's why we're here. We want your questions. If I say something that doesn't make sense, let me know, please. Rates, we refer to interest rates. The Federal Reserve is charged with monetary policy, controlling the money supply. Now, until the Fed, it was controlled by the Treasury Department, which was accused of using the money supply for political purposes. So they could, for example, tighten the money supply after a major election and then ease it before the next election so the economy would plunge and then start to recover. Well, voters would only remember the recovery and good times. And they thought, oh, the bad policies were due to the previous politicians. These guys are doing the job right. So that's why the Federal Reserve was created, to have supposedly an independent board controlling monetary policy. And so the Fed controls the supply of money. And they have various tools to do that. And one of the major tools they have is controlling interest rates. They control the underlying rates that banks pay for money. And so if banks' cost for money for funds rises, well, banks have to charge more to consumers. The Treasury. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I have a question, and I also wanted to make sure that this was clear if I'm wrong, just so we can all understand. Whenever I know that the federal government and the Federal Reserve are in bed together, they are both owned by the federal government. But anytime the government wants money from the Federal Reserve, they print the money. Do they not have to pay an interest on the money they get from the Federal Reserve?
Now, the Federal Reserve handles the Treasury auctions. So when the Treasury says, I want to issue a bond, 5-year Treasury bond, the Federal Reserve sells.
I don't understand what that means. So
that's how the federal government raises money. They either collect it in taxes or they borrow it.
And a borrow is a bond.
Yes. It's like a loan. If you buy a Treasury bond, you're making a loan to the government for that number of years, and you're paid that rate of interest, whatever it stated on that bond.
Back up. Question.
How does Federal Reserve and Treasury relate?
Money supply, how it happens.
The Treasury is in charge of fiscal policy. The fiscal policy is raising money and how it's spent. Like the Treasury maintains the books for the U.S. government. And they disperse the checks.
They're the accountant for the U.S. government, correct?
Yes.
So to speak. Okay.
The Federal Reserve controls monetary policy. They're the bank for the U.S. government. So they will handle raising of money and payment of interest. So, for example, the Treasury wants to issue bonds to raise money. The Federal Reserve sells those bonds. Let me finish.
Okay.
The Federal Reserve sells those bonds, takes that money, gives it to the U.S. government to spend, and then the U.S. government will send checks out to the bond purchasers in terms of the interest that they receive. So if you buy a 10-year bond for $100,000, you're lending the government $100,000 for 10 years. They pay you 5% interest. So each year they will mail you a $5,000 check. At the end of the year, at the end of the 10 years, they will mail you the $100,000 back, credit it to your account actually. But that's how the government raises money.
So the government says if you buy a bond, you are loaning that money to us. And in
Yes.
turn, we will pay interest to the individual. Let's just
Whoever
make it
lends them the
simple.
money. Yes.
Let's just make it simple. So let's say John Q. Smith has got an extra $100,000 and the government needs to raise some money, or the Treasury does, because they need it to pay bills. Trying to make it simple. Okay. They say, okay, the rates right now are this percentage, 5%. So you give us $100,000 and then we will send you a 5% check. And then the balance of what you loaned us in 10 years, a 10-year bond. Am I getting this right at all?
Yeah. It's just like you take a loan from the bank. You borrow money, you pay the bank interest, you repay
But the
the loan.
government is buying it from taxpayers.
Is
Borrowing it from taxpayers. Yeah.
From foreign investors, foreign countries, corporations, individuals, whatever.
Okay. Okay.
So-
And is that what the auction is?
The auction is how the bonds are priced. Y'all have probably seen or heard of a cow auction. Somebody brings out a steer and people in the crowd start yelling out prices, or you've got
Let's
an
go.
auctioneer who's calling the price and recognizes people hitting the bid.
Heck, Clay, we're in the South. Let's go with cars. That's probably more
Or
international.
hogs, pigs, suey
Cars.
pigs.
Okay. We can go with animals, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's an auction.
It's a
Well, the
widget.
government runs an auction for bonds in which they say, okay, we want to issue 10-year bonds. What interest rate do you require? And so they take bids. And the bids can only be offered by the big banks. Okay, they're called primaries. 36 banks have a relationship with the Federal Reserve. So these 36 banks will work with smaller banks and individuals and get a sense of how many people want to buy this bond. And then they'll submit a bid. And so you've got 36 different bids, and the Federal Reserve conducts the auction, handles it for the Treasury. They will take the lowest interest bid because obviously they want the cheapest financing they can get, right? So they take that, and then they take the next lowest, and then they take the next lowest until they have the amount of money they want to borrow in that auction. And the rate everybody gets whose bid was accepted is the last bid accepted. So, for example, if Citi bid 5% was the lowest bid submitted, and Chase bid 5.1, and then Morgan bid 5.2, and the volume of those three purchases completed the order. Well, all three bidders would get 5.2%. So that's how the interest rate's determined. It's called a Dutch auction. The last bid accepted, which will be the highest price accepted, is paid to everyone.
Okay.
And that's how the interest rate is set.
By the Fed.
And that's greatly influenced by what the Fed does with interest rates it charges to banks. Because the government is competing in that marketplace for funds. And they have to pay a competitive rate, or else nobody's going to want to buy their bonds. They can get higher rates elsewhere.
Yeah, I know you and I had a conversation a few years ago about, like, if you were going to loan somebody money, what is the least amount you could take? And, I was like, yeah, 5%. You're like, yeah, that's about where it usually rests. Because why would you loan anyone money, less than 5%? I think that's sort of where our conversation was going.
Yeah, we were talking about what's the historic rate for short-term money, and it's around 4%. So the past 10 years, when it's been 0.2%, I mean, that's a 20th of what the rate historically has been. Well, that's manipulating the market. That causes distortions in the market, causes people to misprice risk. They're buying more homes than they would ordinarily, that kind of thing. So there's a reason why interest rates need to float freely to where there's fair compensation for the risk people are taking. If they're too low, it incentivizes people to take more risk without being compensated for it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, got a question here. Crazy Cat Queen. When I was a kid, I think I remember my savings account having 6% interest. Now it's so negligible, I don't even keep track. What happened? That's after the financial crisis, the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates to near zero. It's a policy we actually called ZIRP, zero interest rate policy. And so they basically were giving the banks free money, or money at extremely, extremely low rates. So the banks lowered the rates they were charging people on loans. They lowered the rates they were paying on loans. When you make a deposit in a savings account, you're actually lending the bank that money, and they pay you the interest. So banks were being charged lower rates. They paid lower rates. That's what happened. And the Federal Reserve kept those rates too low for too long. It just distorted the entire market. People who, for example, who had $1 million and wanted to retire, reached 65 and wanted to retire, put $1 million aside. Well, historically, 4%, you were going to earn $40,000 a year off that money. You can retire off $40,000 a year. Well, for the past 12 years, instead of 4%, they were getting 0.2%. So instead of 40,000, they were getting 2,000. You can't retire off and live off $2,000 a year. So that hurts people, retiring early. opening up positions for younger people. So it has a number of unintended consequences, and all of them are bad in terms of distorting how the financial markets work and how the financial markets price risk and reward for risk. Most people don't want to invest and take risk if they're only going to earn 0.2%. It's too risky for that kind of return. Crazy Cat Queen, when I loan somebody money, I don't ever expect to see it back. Yeah, a lot of times what was Ben Franklin's old adage? A loan to a friend loses both itself and the friend.
You should consider it a donation or a pledge, as Amber Heard would say. Now, yes, Julia, I do remember the Dutch auction for the leather mask for the Stollery. And hang on, we have more, Clay. Are you riveted yet?
I'm riveted.
She won that mask. The U.S. Postal Service lost it. Jan Wallace has sent me something.
That is sad.
Mm-hmm. Jan Wallace sent me something of secrets, and she is freaking out because it has not arrived yet, and she's worried that it has disappeared.
Yeah, I like how they say the U.S. Postal Service lost it. How do you lose a plague mask? You don't.
It was a cool mask. It was like...
I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just irritating.
That's awful. I'm so sorry. The U.S. Postal Service, if this helps you at all, they do have a place in Atlanta where they keep all of the lost mail. I don't know if that helps, but that's where they send everything, and they leave it there for about 10 years before they destroy it. So it did go to a good cause.
Yeah, I just hate that mask was lost.
I do too. So if there is a way to reach out to Atlanta, if it was the U.S. Postal Service, that's where they keep everything. Just letting you know, if that's helpful at all. Dadgummit. We have totally gone off, script tonight, but you know what? That's okay.
If y'all are happy, I'm happy.
The scary part about the Taiwan thing was that when Russia invaded the Ukraine, they were thinking that was going to give China permission to invade Taiwan if they got away with it. At least that's what I heard on my daily news things. But
yeah, I think some of the risk is that we're giving Ukraine such a large amount of our munitions that in many areas we are below what's necessary. We don't have enough to carry on a war for more than 30 or 60 days. So that's getting a little stupid to me. But
I'll be right back.
We'll see. We'll see if China moves or what they do or don't. Some people think that right now China is not really capable of sustaining a invasion. It takes a fair amount of equipment to move sizable number of troops 90 miles. So we'll see, obviously, but we have gotten dangerously low on some munitions and ammo supplies. Now, as Ellen mentioned, we've gotten a little bit off target. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the things we were going to cover. Yeah, we mentioned over the past several weeks, we've talked about a number of financial failures, financial issues, financial frauds, whatever. And some questions came up about BLM because there was a lawsuit involving BLM and it was settled just a few days ago. So it's been in the news. So a little background. BLM, Black Lives Matter, was founded in 2013 in response to Trayvon Martin's shooting. Guy by the name of George Zimmerman shot him, claimed self-defense. Well, he was charged on second-degree murder and manslaughter charges. He was acquitted of those charges in a trial. The DOJ Department of Justice investigated him for 3 years and concluded there was no evidence that Zimmerman intentionally violated Martin's civil rights. So nothing ever came of that. Well, as a reaction to that, BLM was started by basically 3 individuals, Patrice Cullors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tornetti. And we're really focused mostly on Patrice. It was an organization with a relatively loose structure. It was organizationally vague. There wasn't a firm structure or relationship with local chapters, nothing like that. It was just basically these 3 individuals got together and say, hey, we're forming this company or this entity. And that was enough. I mean, for example, the Ford Foundation committed to a 6-year investment plan of up to $100 million. Another $33 million was given by the Open Society. According to The Economist in 2020, donations to BLM and its associated charities amounted to about $10.6 billion. That's a lot of money. It had garnered tons of support as a national anti-racist movement. And as you can imagine, it's controversial. Anytime you've got that kind of money surrounding some political issue, it's controversial. And BLM has come under a fair amount of criticism down through the years, even from civil rights leaders who criticized it as disrespectful or ineffective, claiming all they do is make noise. You had prominent civil rights leaders like Cecil Murray and Najee Ali, Earl Hutchinson, all giving Black Lives Matter some honest criticism. Some academics, for example, John McWhorter at Columbia, Mary Beth Grassman at Rutgers, criticized it for silencing speech and repressing academic freedom. And they're kind of referring to some of the forced diversity, some of the diversity statements that are demanded in admission, in hiring, in tenure decisions. Been a number of court lawsuits over some of that. Some controversial statements, for example, the statement that math is racist. And I'm not kidding you. I don't know if you saw that or not. A webinar created by the Ontario education group. I forget the exact name of it. The president, Jason Tu, used the phrase 2 + 2 = 4. Those who use the phrase 2 + 2 = 4 are engaged in an act of, quote, covert white supremacy. How cool is that?
Math is objective.
Yeah, 2 + 2 = white supremacy. You know, some of it just got insane, just got crazy. You know, Ellen and I watched the movie Hidden Figures a few months ago. Great movie if you haven't seen it. And, you know, made me wonder, what would Katherine Johnson and Dorothy Vaughan and Mary Jackson say about this 2 + 2 = white supremacy if they were still alive to comment? Would love to hear their comments. And for those of you that haven't seen the movie, it's about the three women who were basically responsible for doing the mathematical calculations necessary for the Apollo program to land on the moon. The computers weren't capable of doing it, had to be done by hand. Those three women handled it.
And she had to run like half a mile to another building because there was actually racism to go to the colored bathroom.
Yeah.
And she would get in trouble because she was gone for too long. And she's like, she came back soaking wet one day, at least in the movie. And her boss, who I believe was Tom Hanks, was furious. Why are you soaking wet? Where have you been? And she had a tirade. She was just like, I have to go all the way to the main building just to pee and run all the way back here. And I run it every day in heels, in a skirt. What do you want from me? But she knew what 2 + 2 was. I'll tell you that, and a lot more math than I'll ever be able to figure it out.
Yeah, the guy, I was thinking it was Kevin Costner, not Hanks.
Maybe it was. I can't remember.
When hearing her statement that she had to go half a mile away to go to the bathroom, he got a sledgehammer and went to the bathroom and knocked down the whites only sign. And he made it clear to everybody what the new policy was. But they were under pressure trying to get things done, and it just looked like she was taking very long breaks and not really getting in the spirit of the urgency of the moment. But he took care of the problem. Yeah, KP with the save here. Kevin Costner was his boss. And it's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it's informative, it's enlightening, and you just come away just damn proud of those ladies.
What they did was amazing. We never would have had the Apollo launch had it not been for them.
Yeah, she stood next to pages of her calculations, and they were like 6 feet high. The math she was doing is just she should have won a Nobel Prize for it, in my opinion. But anyway,
no calculators, no computers, just writing it all out.
Yep. She was a savant. Now, BLM has taken some heat from other Black leaders for it being disconnected from the communities that it claims it serves.
Now, I'm not sure that you mentioned that high schools and middle schools and elementary schools were giving the same grade for what they considered to be effort as the correct answer. So if you tried, you got an A, even if you were wrong. And if you actually did the math and got it right, you got an A.
Yeah, but I don't know that was because of diversity. But any group, like I said, that raises tons of money, takes political stances, will be controversial. So with BLM, there was a string of articles, papers, lawsuits that over the past few years has kind of pulled back the veil on BLM and what happened to the money contributed. Now, according to IRS releases, the founder, Patrice Cullors, reaped millions for herself and her family members just in 1 year, 2020. And prior to 2020, there are no records. So we don't really know what happened before 2020. But as an example, in 2020, the father of her only child received $969,000. The LLC her brother runs received $841,000 for security services. Security services. What kind of security services does BLM need?
In case y'all forgot, they went and burned down a bunch of cities, destroyed lives, killed police officers.
Well, BLM didn't. Be careful what you say.
BLM International, well, it is complicated.
We're just talking about BLM right now. And a friend, Shaloma Bowers, a close friend, received nearly $2.2 million for consulting services. A sister of a director and a close friend received $107,000 for fundraising activities, which they didn't even have a fundraising department. They were just having people call in money. BLM paid $140,000 to a former director who wasn't even working for the company. And yet it gets better. BLM also spent nearly $6 million, $5.9 million on a Los Angeles mansion for Miss Colors, and spent about $6 million purchasing a mansion in downtown Toronto, another $3 million on some Atlanta real estate. So this was some of the attention that was being drawn to BLM's purchases in the 2020 releases. Now, Juliet, why don't we have records before 2020? That's because BLM had not been audited, had not filed any tax records prior to 2020. In 2020, they applied for and were granted in 2021 IRS status as a charitable foundation. Prior to that, they were not. You just basically were giving money to individuals who were not accountable, who spent it however they chose. The Associated Press did a kind of a financial snapshot, and found BLM raised $90 million in 2020, which apparently led to a little tension once some of the local chapters found out about it, because they only gave out $21 million in grants and funding to local organizations. And even the local chapters, there were only 10 cities formally aligned with the national BLM. So all the other little regional chapters and whatever didn't receive anything. The chapters received anywhere from $600,000 to $69,000 a year from national since 2016. And the 10 were arguing that the funding had hardly been equitable, hence one of the lawsuits. Now, the controversies have hurt BLM's fundraising the last year or two. Total funds raised reportedly dropped to $9 million last year. Pretty far cry from the $80 million the year before.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Which $26 million was paid to organizations and families. So that leaves $60 million floating around somewhere. Now, Patrice resigned once all this attention and publicity started being focused on it. Patrice resigned as director. She's no longer involved in the day-to-day running of BLM due to the allegations of impropriety, which, quote unquote, are as of yet unproven in court. What we have are tax records, IRS disclosures, Form 990, that they have filed, which this information comes from, and the AP's own analysis. So none of this originates from me. She also maintained a relatively lavish lifestyle. One year she had $80,000 in travel cost, first class, of course. And a group of chapters filed a lawsuit against the foundation, a case which was presented just this last spring and in which a few days ago was tossed out by the judge. She stated that the plaintiffs had failed to prove they were entitled to any donated funds. Their claim was simply that, hey, we're a part of BLM. We have a local chapter. The Nationals raising money supposedly on behalf of all of us. They should equitably distribute it. The judge said there's no legal claim, no legal basis for that. They're using the name BLM. You're using the name BLM, and never the twain shall meet. There's no legal liability accrued from that similar name. You have no formal relationship, no formal claim to the funds. So she threw out. Now, the goal here is not just to bash BLM or any other political group, but we've talked about financial frauds over the past few months. So if you're interested in giving to a cause, it's just like investing. How do you know the money's going to go to the stated purpose? A lot of people on the internet have repeatedly dealt with scams. People on the internet raising money for a purpose that have then basically stolen it. Julia,
I'm not mentioning names.
Judge tossed the chapter's claim. Oh crap, that stinks. Yeah, they had no legal basis. They might have had a moral claim, but they had no legal claim. So how do you know? What you're giving to is what you want to give to. There's no perfect formula, but there are certain things that maybe you can try to be aware of. First, who's handling the funds? What individual makes the call, and what is their history or track record in terms of charitable activities? Do they live a modest lifestyle? You know, do they have a history of dealings? What's their reputation, so to speak? Have they precisely stated what they will use the money for, what will happen to the funds raised, or do they speak in vague terms? You know, are they a beauty pageant contest? You know, we want world peace. Everybody can agree to that general sentiment. It's a good cause. Anti-racism, it's a good cause. But the devil's always in the details.
Well, I know even Clay doesn't donate to or prefers to not donate to Goodwill because their expenses just help me out. The word I'm looking for is.
Yeah, they spend too much on their executive management. I generally don't give to any charitable organization that spends more than 10% of their money on their executives and fundraising. So that's just my limit. That's just my standard.
All right,
so I give them 10% to pay for their staff, their executives, and fundraising. I expect 90% to go to the intended cause or purpose.
There are just a few things from the past, and okay, let's do this. This is about the math.
Crazy Cat Queen. I have a list of people that will get lots of money if I ever win the lottery. People I trust that will do good with it. Friends Surgery Hospital in Gabon, Africa. Ian's free legal defense fund. So many. I need to start a free financial counseling fund.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
I have one on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it in regular size. Let me see if I can read the small size. The irony, given the zero was
conceptualized by the Hindus, and modern mathematics, algebra was conceptualized by the Arabs. To call math white supremacy is rich. What a fracas.
You know, I hadn't even thought of that, but that's a good point.
All right, hang on.
You know, math is not just a white creation. Huge contribution have been made by other people, other regions, other races.
All right, then we're going to go with, did we do this one already?
Quad E.
Hey, Quad E. I've been trying to get you up here. I think some organization will say what they think will increase their donation or coverage. Scam, not really caring about the people they say they care about or will help. Just ask George Santos.
You know, absolutely. It is unfortunately altogether too easy to take advantage of people who are charitably inclined. They want to give. They have very generally they may have very tender hearts, soft spirits, whatever, and they want to help people. So if somebody can present them a sad enough story, it's easy to generate funds from those types of people. So,
Crazy Cat Queen. Jesus, do you know what kind of good I could do with all that money? Yeah, a lot of us could, but that's not how it all worked out.
And to me, it's just amazing the amount of money they raise just because of their name.
Yeah. And Julia 543, they were also excellent at twisting words. So if you were against the organization, you didn't agree that Black Lives Matter and were a white supremacist. Of course.
Yep. There was a lot of controversy, a lot of anger, a lot of arrogance, a lot of pretentiousness surrounding it.
Okay.
And,
go ahead.
That's just the privilege of living in a society with free speech and politics. That's why you have to be able to discern not who's saying the right things, but who's actually making the correct arguments.
Actions versus words. So,
how do you find those IRS forms? Most of the forms filed, like Form 990 from charitable organizations, are publicly available.
Wherefore art thou? 990 forms?
Yeah, I'll have to look and see.
When he finds it, I'll send it to you, Julia.
Yeah. They're not on Edgar, which is a SEC database, government database, but they're out there. I've actually not searched for them. I'm taking the AP's own statements, but I'll see what I can find for you.
Yeah, you can't always trust the AP either. Just saying. But those were, BLM did release their, okay, real quick, Quaddy, before you leave.
I'm confused why Goodwill doesn't sell their clothes for $1. I have seen cheaper clothes at Walmart. I got nothing, Quaddy. I agree with you.
They got executive expenses.
Yeah. Sometimes you wonder if these organizations really are to help indigent or to fund their own operations. Goodwill runs itself more like a business. That's why I would generally give most of my funds to Salvation Army. Their money, everything you give, what they sell, whatever, actually does go to help their intended targets.
All right, Julia has sent me the info of the organization, and I will forward that to Clay.
Okay, we'll take a look. Get back in touch with you.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Quaddy. Hope you have a great dinner. Yeah, Crazy Cat Queen. Say that 10 times fast. I think they have a place. Try the IRS. I think they have a place where there's a list of info on how to find them. I believe they do, and that's what I was going to do, but I'm not sure of the exact site. All right, a couple other things that you can be aware of. Does the group have a well-defined structure? What's the involvement of other individuals or officials? Do these individuals answer questions freely about their role, their involvement, their compensation? You ask somebody with Salvation Army, they're very open. You ask somebody with BLM, they're very tight-lipped. Is the funds you contribute, is it going to a 501c3, a charitable corporation, a legal entity that has legal requirements for disclosures? Or is it actually going to an individual like a lot of the BLM money did? Charitable corporation registered with the IRS and the federal government has legal disclosure requirements. An individual has none. BLM was basically run by individuals until 2020. Another thing you want to be aware of is, do they use a fundraising arms or raise funds directly? If they use a fundraising arm, then, 50, 60, 70% of what is raised never makes it to the charity. It's kept by the fundraising arm. BLM used several other organizations to raise funds, several who sought to conceal their association. Why would you be timid about admitting who you raise money for? Well, plug in your own guess, but that's all you need to know. If somebody's trying to hide something from you in terms of their charitable organization or how they run it, that's all you need to know. You don't need the answers. You know enough.
All right, we have I have never done this before, so I guess I got to send it in private chat. We have someone watching from Rumble. And there it is. It is at least on. It's in the regular chat. I don't know where it shows up. I guess it'll show up. There is Moffitt on money.
What happened to the money?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a question, or did you answer it?
No, that is what was on Rumble.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you for watching on Rumble. We've been trying to figure out how to make all this work.
Oh.
What did you do? You copied it?
Yep. Copy and go and paste it
on
it. Oh, okay. Great minds. Yeah, the question.
We're professionals, people. We are professionals.
We're rookies, but we're getting better. What happened to the money? It went exactly to where we thought it would, enriching a very small few with things that they would never have in their lives. And BLM said, screw the rest of America. I got on the verge of a depression when our own government won't recognize the actual inflation rate.
Wait, where are you?
I've got two different thoughts here.
Wait. Huh?
The first one is
okay,
just,
you didn't read the whole thing.
Expressing the sentiment, enriching a small few, which they would, with things that they would never have in their lives. Could Patrice buy a $6 million mansion in LA? Kind of doubt it. So, there's some truth in there. They did not take the money and help, a lot of people. That's part of what all the lawsuits were about. They were relatively stingy with the money. And people, when they found out, were very surprised by the activities of the national organization.
And hang on. Okay. And BLM said, screw the rest of America. I got what I wanted, and I thought I was entitled to. Personally, I wouldn't have given BLM 1 red cent. Fund a terrorist Marxist organization. Really? Now for the second part, recession, my ass. We are on the verge of a depression when our own government won't recognize the actual inflation rate.
Yeah, I don't have a name for your comments, but honestly, tell us what you think.
I can find it. Hang on. Let me go back to.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, I like I say, I only fund organizations that I'm familiar with the people and where the money's going, because there is so much fraud in this area. And I can't prove fraud with BLM. I don't think most people figured Patrice would be buying mansions all over the place, but I can't say that's fraud because she didn't have any commitment, legal or otherwise, to do anything different with the money, if that makes sense. But I don't think it really went to the goal or target that most of the donors had in mind. And are we on the verge of a depression or recession? We're about to talk about that, so I'm going to kind of delay that response for a few minutes.
I'm having
KP,
issues with Rumble. Sorry.
There are many organizations that do this with their money, though, and currently I'm not as willing to be as generous as in the past. That's just a fact of life. It is. And, you know, if you want your money to count, if you want it to go to an intended purpose rather than to somebody's pockets, you've got to be careful in terms of where you donate. And it is a very sad thing. I agree completely. A few other things to be aware of for charitable companies or firms, entities raising money. You want openness, you want transparency. Do they have audits from an independent accounting firm, or is a brother-in-law handling the audits? Is the accountant friendly to the director? That's not always a problem, because some small charities will rely on even donations of auditing work. Still could be a fine audit, but it is something to ask a question, be aware of, whether their audits are from an independent accounting firm. And, does the group maintain an independent office? Well, Black Lives Matter didn't. Black Lives Matter still doesn't. Here is the web page from Black Lives Matter, their contact, and if you'll notice, they only have an email. They don't have a phone number. They don't have an address. They don't have an office. It's still being run out of somebody's house. You'd think for $90 million, they could probably do a little something different. But yeah, there's really nothing in their contact list or their homepage that gives any indication of what you would expect from a company, a charity raising $90 million a year in terms of structure, organization, offices, actual people to contact, etc.
So you can buy, you can donate, you can join.
Yeah. You can always donate.
But outside of that, you can frickin' forget it. Just don't contact us.
It's sad. Tons of money could have made huge differences in some parts of Chicago's and other cities.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. As it is, a lot of people gave and not getting the value that they expected to receive out of it.
True.
So Black Lives Matter, what to be aware of, covering a little bit of what's been in the news. Let me touch quickly here on a couple things as far as, well, we've got recession and gold. Do y'all have a favorite?
Recession or gold?
Yeah. We got a few minutes left, so I think I'll talk about gold and silver. We've talked about recession.
Why don't you talk about, well, you did, but you never answered the actual question. Are we in a recession?
I kind of talked about that some, last week in terms of the NBER is the one that officially declares a recession. And recessions historically have been where you've got 2 negative quarters of GDP growth. So the economy shrunk 2 consecutive quarters. Last quarter, GDP was positive, slightly so. But the interesting thing to me is if you took that GDP and took out the exports to Ukraine, which were basically bullets and tanks and whatever in inventory, nothing we produced. They were just in inventory.
That no one paid for.
To Ukraine. So that counts as an export. That's a component of GDP. So GDP's up. Well, if you take that particular component out, the exports to Ukraine, GDP was negative last quarter.
So we have 2 quarters of negative GDP.
Well, the thing is, if you look at other statistics, like the administration was bragging about ADP payroll, their employment report showed 497,000 jobs in their last report created for the past month, June. That's a damn big number.
That's a bullshit number.
Well, the thing is, the devil's always in the details. So if we go down and start looking at the actual data, you'll see that large companies were virtually flat, where the growth was generally in the small companies. Now, what kind of firms are small companies generally? Let's go down and look at industry. You've got construction, was 97,000 people. I think this is kind of a temporary blip because housing is taking a nosedive. Now, new construction was up as people are trying to get homes finished before rates go even higher. So I think this is a little bit misleading. But you'll notice the number right below it, manufacturing, is crashing. Okay, trade, transportation, and utilities. So a lot more people are becoming taxi drivers. Information, financial activities, professional and business services. These are all professional, high-paying jobs. All were down. And education and health services. This is mostly government jobs. So the government was hiring.
Leisure and
new teachers
hospitality.
being hired for the next year.
Yeah.
But this is the big one. Leisure and hospitality. Almost half of the total jobs number. And what kind of jobs are leisure and hospitality? Can you say bartender, waitress?
Stripper.
They're part-time jobs. So you've got people losing full-time jobs, manufacturing, and taking part-time jobs. That's not the sign of a booming economy. Okay?
No, it's not.
In addition,
every restaurant is hiring.
In addition, wages. The real change in weekly earnings has been negative for 26 months in a row. That means every month you earn less due to inflation for 26 months in a row. That is not the sign of a growing economy. What it is for an average family that makes has an income of $55,000 a year, $55,000 to $60,000 a year. That's a $5,600 cut in purchasing power. It's like your income has been cut by $5,600. That's hardly the sign of a strong economy. Okay. We also talked a week or two ago about the two different employment surveys that the government does. ADP is a private company.
Who is ADP, Clay? Who is ADP?
It's a payroll firm.
Okay.
So, but the government does two different job surveys, the household and the establishment. The establishment surveys employers. So if they hire somebody for a part-time job, that's a new job. Well, a household, if somebody has a job and picks up an additional part-time job because they can't make ends meet, That doesn't count. You still got one person employed. So there's been a wide divergence in the establishment and household surveys. Households show 310,000 fewer people employed. The establishment shows every payroll, whether it's full or part-time. So if a person has 3 part-time jobs, that's 3 jobs in the establishment. So to me, the establishment is not really inaccurate. Also, you're getting far less participation in the establishment. Used to be about 70% of their surveys would be completed and returned by employers. Now it's only about 30. That's not a good sign.
No, it's not.
We've talked about commercial real estate and the sky-high vacancy rates. Well, the delinquency rate on mortgage-backed securities jumped to 4.5% in June, up from 1.5% a few months ago.
So, Clay,
practical realities, companies are figuring out they don't need all this prime downtown office space, or they've gone out of business and don't need office space. And this kind of vacancy rate in the major cities is just beginning to impact loans that are interest-only loans or balloon mortgages. These have to these types of mortgages are having to refinance now at 300 or 400% higher rates. Even Blackstone's real estate fund. Blackstone is a $10 trillion investment management firm, huge investment management firm. They've got a real estate fund, and their real estate fund is having to liquidate properties to raise cash due to their defaulting on mortgages. They're losing equity. They're losing money. So this is structural. It's not market specific, and it's going to be a problem for many years. This is not something you see in a booming economy. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So I have heard, doing my little research, that 40% of San Francisco's commercial real estate is vacant. At least that much of New York City's commercial real estate is vacant. And I'm seeing from Julia, Chicago's downtown is cratering. People realize, thank you, Crazy Cat Queen. The chair recognizes Ellen. Hi. The problem is that, in my opinion, commercial real estate has always been safe for banks. Safe as far as mortgages, as loans, because everyone needed commercial real estate. Then there was the whole virus issue. And people realized they could stay at home, and businesses realized that they didn't need the office space in order to continue to run their business, right?
Right.
Okay. So seeing as commercial real estate was always a sure thing, a safe thing, and you see what's going on now, and then you look at what Detroit was 10 years ago, which it just crumbled entirely. What does that mean? Banks are banking, quote unquote, banking on these commercial loans and mortgages for their
Let me expand on your point briefly, because we're running out of time.
Okay.
The vacancy rates you've just listed are probably overstated, because vacancy means that nobody is paying for that space. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of firms that have lease agreements that are still running, but they don't have people coming to the office. So the buildings may be empty, or those floors may be empty, but somebody's still paying for it. So it doesn't count as a vacancy yet. So the vacancy rates are going to get higher. Problem with commercial real estate is 85% of commercial real estate is owned by small banks. So as these defaults start to pile up, these small banks are going to start taking severe hits. So like I mentioned a few weeks ago, we're not done with the banking crisis yet. We're having a nice little lull. The Fed supplied some liquidity to some banks that were about to go belly up, but we're not out of the woods yet. There's still a lot of huge issues, particularly with commercial real estate. Couple other things on the economy real quick. Bankruptcies are soaring. Bankruptcies are up 68% this year. 68%. That's not a typo. And I looked at the S&P 500, the earnings of the S&P 500 companies for the first 6 months versus the first 6 months of last year. And they are down almost 20%. That kind of drop in earnings, that's not a recession, that's a depression. Now, I'm not saying we're actually hitting a depression, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on out there that's kind of under the table that hadn't gotten a lot of publicity or attention that are throwing up huge red flags that things are going to get worse. So, I still urge for investors, I still urge caution. Maybe my caution is overstated or overblown, but there are just risks you can't afford to take. And I'd rather miss some of the upside than catch a lot of the downside. So I'm still being relatively conservative. And I do want to say I'm not offering investment advice to anybody in specific, just talking in general views here. So are we in a recession? I think with those things, you can make a decent argument that we are, that NBER months from now, when they go back and say, okay, here's where the recession started, they may very well include this period. But, I think there's a lot of risk. Julia, maybe we could talk more about how to protect yourself going into a recession.
That sounds like a Tuesday night question to me.
Yeah, we'll try to talk about that some Tuesday night.
That'll be our first question. How about that?
Fair enough.
Because we are getting Clay likes to go to bed at 9:30. So.
One of us does anyway, and that's all I'll say about that.
Y'all, I get sleepy.
She gets sleepy.
I get sleepy.
But hey, really appreciate y'all joining us tonight. For those who will pop in on the replay crew,
we love y'all too. And thank you guys, all of you, for being here. We really, like I said, we're trying to grow this channel, and we just want good people who just really want good financial information to protect themselves from all the things that may or may not happen, but at least you'll be informed and make good financial decisions.
Yeah, that's the idea, to give you better information, help you make better decisions for yourself and your family. So love having you. Thank you again for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing y'all Tuesday night or next Saturday. Either way, our time is up. We thank you for yours. Blessings to you all.
Love you guys. Night, night.